The snow fell Alsace, January 24th, 1945, 8:30 in the morning. Major Ernst Keller lowered his binoculars. His breath hung white in the frozen air. Before him, across 200 meters of open field, 50 German soldiers lay dead in the snow, some face down, some twisted at impossible angles, some still gripping rifles they would never fire again. Not a single bullet wound among them. Artillery, precise, surgical. Someone had called in every strike with perfect accuracy. Someone who could see everything. Someone who knew exactly where each man was standing, where each squad was moving, where each officer was giving orders. Keller raised the binoculars again. He scanned the American defensive line 400 meters away, searched the tree line, the farmhouses, the stone walls. Nothing. No movement, no muzzle flash, no telltale glint of observation equipment. His radio man approached, boots crunching in the snow. "Herr Major, final count from battalion. Report, 96 casualties, 50 dead, 46 wounded, in 3 hours." Keller closed his eyes. 96 men, 3 hours, one forward observer. Somewhere out there in that frozen hell, an American was watching, calling death from the sky with a telephone and a good eye. "Deploy patrols," Keller said. "Find him. I want that observer found and eliminated. He's cost us nearly 100 men." The radio man hesitated. "Herr Major, we've swept that field twice already. There's nothing there, just snow and shell craters and—" "Then sweep it again. He's there. Somewhere. He has to be." Keller stared at the field, at the bodies of his men scattered like broken toys, at the crater-pocked snow that should have been their breakthrough, should have been their victory, should have been the collapse of the American line and the encirclement of an entire battalion. Instead, it was a graveyard. "Find the ghost," Keller whispered. 3 hours earlier, 5:30 in the morning, 30 kilometers behind the front line, Emmett Leland Rafferty opened his eyes in the darkness of the field hospital. His hip throbbed. The morphine had worn off 2 hours ago, but he hadn't asked for more. Couldn't afford the fog in his head. Not now. He listened. In the distance, barely audible over the snoring of wounded men in adjacent cots, came the sound. A deep, rhythmic thump. Then another. Then 3 in quick succession. Artillery. But not American 105s, not the familiar bark of friendly howitzers. This was different, heavier, Germanic. The distinctive crack of 88mm guns, flat trajectory, high velocity. The sound every infantryman learned to fear. Emmett sat up. Pain shot through his hip where shrapnel had torn through muscle 4 days ago. The doctor had been clear. 2 weeks minimum, no weight on that leg. Any movement risked tearing the stitches, risked infection, risked permanent damage. The artillery continued, getting closer. Not random harassment fire. This was concentrated. This was a barrage. This was preparation for an attack. His battalion, 3rd Battalion, 7th Infantry Regiment. They were getting hit. Emmett threw back the thin blanket and swung his legs off the cot. The floor was ice-cold concrete against his bare feet. His uniform hung on a chair beside the bed. Boots underneath. His gear bag slumped against the wall. He dressed in the dark. Every movement sent fresh agony through his hip. He bit down on his tongue, tasted copper, forced himself to keep moving. Shirt, trousers, belt, jacket, boots, left foot, left foot tighter, right foot looser, the way his father had taught him. Always tie the right boot looser when you've got a right side injury. Gives you room to move. The artillery barrage intensified. He counted the seconds between impacts. 4, 3, 2. They were walking the fire forward. Standard German tactic. Soften the defensive line, then send in the infantry. Then the tanks. His battalion had maybe 400 men, spread thin across 2 miles of frozen farmland. They'd been in the line for 3 weeks without relief. exhausted, under strength, low on ammunition. If the Germans hit them with a full-scale assault right now, Emmett grabbed his gear bag and limped toward the door. Private Rafferty. He turned. Nurse Helen Carter stood in the doorway to the ward, silhouetted by dim lamplight from the hallway beyond. 40 years old, gray showing in her dark hair, eyes that had seen too many men die on operating tables. "Ma'am, you can't walk on that hip. Doctor's orders." "Yes, ma'am." "Where do you think you're going?" "Ma'am, that's German artillery, 88 millimeter, maybe 105. They're hitting my battalion. I need to get back to the line." Helen stepped into the ward and closed the door behind her. She moved close enough that he could see her face in the pre-dawn darkness, see the lines around her eyes, the set of her jaw. "My husband," she said quietly, "was in the 1st Battalion, Anzio, January of last year. He bled out on a beach while I was stateside reading his letters about how he'd be home by spring." Emmett said nothing. "He served under Colonel Briggs, same colonel who commands your battalion now. And before Thomas died, he wrote me one last letter. Said Briggs was the kind of officer who'd get his men home, the kind worth dying for." She reached past Emmett and picked up his gear bag, handed it to him. "The motor pool has a Jeep with a loose distributor cap, far corner, keys are in it. If someone were to steal that Jeep, it would take us at least an hour to notice. Ma'am, don't thank me, just go. And tell Colonel Briggs that Thomas Carter's widow says hello." Emmett limped past her toward the door, stopped, turned back. "Ma'am, I'm sorry about your husband." "I'm sorry about all of them," Helen said. "Now go, before I change my mind." The Jeep's engine coughed to life on the 3rd try. Emmett pulled out of the motor pool without headlights. Dawn was breaking over the Vosges Mountains to the east, pink and gold lights spilling across the snowfields. Beautiful if you didn't know what it meant. Beautiful if you couldn't hear the artillery hammering the horizon. He drove fast, 30 kilometers. The roads were frozen solid, rutted from supply trucks in tank treads. Every bump sent fresh pain through his hip. He ignored it, focused on the sound ahead, the thunder of guns, getting louder, getting closer. He passed through an artillery battery positioned in a frozen vineyard. American 105 millimeter howitzers, 6 guns, crews working in organized chaos, loading, firing, loading, firing. The battery commander waved him through without stopping. Everyone was moving toward the sound, toward the fight. The road curved north. Emmett followed it, past a burned-out farmhouse, past a shot-up German half-track, frozen soldiers still inside, past a grove of trees stripped bare by shellfire. Then the road ran out and he was driving across open ground, following the ruts of previous vehicles, following the sound of war. Ahead, he saw the command post, a stone building with a collapsed roof, camouflage netting, radio antennas, a cluster of officers and runners moving in and out. Emmett pulled the Jeep up behind a supply truck and killed the engine. His hips screamed when he stepped down. He grabbed his gear bag, started walking. Each step was fire. Each step was determination. Each step brought him closer to the sound he'd been born knowing how to follow, the sound of men who needed help. Inside the command post, Lieutenant Colonel Harlan Briggs stood over a map table. 42 years old, face carved from angles and hard decisions, eyes that never stopped moving, calculating, assessing, looking for the advantage that would keep his men alive one more day. He glanced up when Emmett entered, did a double take. "Rafferty, what the hell are you doing here? You're supposed to be in a hospital bed 30 clicks back." "Yes, sir. I heard the 88s. Figured the battalion might need an observer." Briggs stared at him, then impossibly smiled. "You stole a Jeep from a field hospital with a hole in your hip because you heard German artillery?" "Yes, sir." "Jesus Christ." Briggs shook his head, turned back to the map. "Well, you're here now, and God knows we need you. 600 German infantry hit us at 0600, supported by 6 Mark 6 Tigers and multiple tank destroyers. They're pushing hard on our left flank, trying to break through and encircle the battalion. Emmett limped to the map table, studied the markings, red for German positions, blue for American. The red arrows pointing straight at a thin blue line, a very thin blue line. "Where's Williams?" Emmett asked. Williams was the primary forward observer. "Good man, steady hands. Killed 20 minutes ago," Briggs said flatly. "Took a direct hit from an 88, him and his radio operator. We've got no eyes forward. Artillery's shooting blind. We're hemorrhaging men, and I can't see the goddamn battlefield." The building shook. Plaster dust drifted from the ceiling. Outside, someone screamed, then stopped. Briggs looked at Emmett, really looked at him, at the way he was favoring his right leg, at the pale face, at the gear bag in his hand. "I need someone to run forward," Briggs said. "Get eyes on the German advance. Call in fire missions." "But it's suicide, Rafferty, pure suicide. We're talking about running 400 yards across open ground under artillery fire, finding a position within 30 meters of the German line, and staying there, exposed, calling strikes while they hunt for you." "I'll go, sir." "You can barely walk." "I can crawl if I have to." Briggs stared at him. Long seconds passed. Artillery thumped outside. Someone shouted coordinates. A radio crackled. "Why?" Briggs asked finally. "Why volunteer for this? You're wounded. You've done your part. You could stay here in relative safety and no one would question it." Emmett thought about his answer, about the real reason. The reason that went back 26 years to a Kentucky holler where a 6-year-old boy learned to tie string between trees so he could find his way home through the forest. The reason that went back to a father's patient hands showing him how to mark a trail, how to become invisible, how to survive when the odds said you should die. But that wasn't what Briggs needed to hear. "Sir, that's 3rd Battalion out there. Those are my brothers. If I can keep them alive, I go." Briggs nodded slowly. Looked back at the map, at the red arrows pushing deeper into the blue line, at the math that said 412 men were about to be surrounded and destroyed unless someone could see the battlefield and guide the artillery onto target. "All right," Briggs said. "All right. You're my observer. What do you need?" 400-yard spool of WD1/T T-field wire, TA-312 field telephone, Thompson submachine gun, extra magazines. "Why the wire?" "Williams used radio." "Sir, radio batteries die. Radio gets interference. Radio needs line of sight to work in this terrain. Wire is direct. Wire is reliable. And sir," Emmett paused, chose his words carefully, "wire is how I navigate back." Briggs frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means I grew up hunting in Kentucky forests, sir. Deep woods, easy to get lost. My father taught me to mark my trail going in, so I could always find my way out. Wire does the same thing. I lay it as I advance. If I need to fall back through smoke or under fire, I follow the wire back to safety." Understanding dawned in Briggs's eyes. "You're going to use communications wire as a navigation system?" "Yes, sir. In combat, knowing where you are is as important as knowing where the enemy is. Wire gives me both." "I've never heard of anyone doing that." "No, sir, it's a hunting trick, not a military one." Briggs turned to a sergeant standing nearby. "Get him everything he needs. Fast." The sergeant disappeared, returned 3 minutes later with the equipment. Emmett checked each item. The wire spool was standard issue, dark olive drab insulation over twisted copper conductors. 23 pounds of wire wound tight, 400 yards. The TA-312 field telephone was battered but functional. Crank generator on the side. Weatherproof. Built to survive artillery barrages and mud and snow and everything war could throw at it. Emmett clipped it to his belt. The Thompson felt good in his hands. 45 caliber. Simple. Reliable. Not a precision weapon, but in close quarters nothing beat it. He loaded a 30-round stick magazine, chambered a round, set the safety, slung it across his back. "One more thing," a voice said behind him. Emmett turned. A young private stood there, 21, maybe 22, face still soft, eyes still believing he might survive this. Danny Foster, rifleman, good kid, wrote letters to his mother every night before sleep. "I'm going with you," Danny said. "No. Sir, with respect, you can barely walk. If you go down, someone needs to get that telephone back. Someone needs to finish the mission." Emmett looked at Briggs. The colonel was watching, calculating again, weighing risks, weighing lives. "He's right," Briggs said. "Two men doubles your chance of success." "Sir, his mother—" "My mother wants me to come home," Danny interrupted. "Best way to do that is to keep this battalion alive. I'm going." Emmett studied the kid's face, saw determination there, saw courage, saw the same reason he was here. Because these were their brothers, and brothers don't let brothers die alone. "Stay 15 meters behind me," Emmett said. "Don't bunch up. If I go down, grab the phone and keep calling targets. You understand?" "Yes, sir." "I'm not an officer. Don't call me sir." Yes, Emmett." Briggs moved to the doorway, looked out at the battlefield, at the smoke, at the explosions walking across the frozen fields, at the impossible distance between here and there. "Rafferty," he said quietly, "if you make it to that forward position and establish comms, you'll be 30 meters past our forward line. The Germans will be advancing from 400 yards out. When they close to within 100 yards of our positions, that's 70 yards from you. Close enough that our artillery becomes danger close. Do you understand what that means?" "Yes, sir." "It means if the Germans push past you, you're dead. If they spot you, you're dead. If they overrun the line, you're dead, and I won't be able to help you." "I understand, sir." 412 men are counting on you, on what you see, on what you call in. The entire battalion's survival depends on whether you can stay alive long enough to do your job. "Yes, sir." Briggs turned, met Emmett's eyes. In that moment, something passed between them. Not words, not orders, just the understanding between men who've seen war and know its cost, who've held friends as they died, who've made choices that haunt them in the dark hours before dawn. "There's one more thing you should know," Briggs said. "Intelligence reports indicate the German force is commanded by Major Ernst Keller, Eastern Front veteran, experienced, aggressive. He's not going to stop until he breaks through. And when his men start dying from artillery they can't see, he's going to hunt for you, personally. He's going to put every available man on finding you and killing you." "Then I better make sure he doesn't find me, sir." "How?" Emmett smiled, cold, distant. The smile of a man remembering another time, another place. Deep Kentucky woods and a father's patient voice teaching a 6-year-old boy how to disappear. "Sir, I learned to hunt wild turkeys when I was 6 years old. Turkeys have the best eyesight of any bird in North America. They can spot a human blink from 300 yards. They can see a wrist turn, a finger twitch. They see everything. And if they see you, they're gone. So you learn to be invisible. You learn to become part of the landscape. You learn to breathe without moving, to watch without blinking, to disappear while you're right there in front of them. And you think that works on German soldiers? Sir, turkeys are a lot harder to fool than soldiers." For the first time that morning, Briggs laughed, a short, sharp bark of sound. "All right, go. And Rafferty—" "Sir?" "Come back, that's an order." "Yes, sir." Emmett and Danny moved to the door. The morning was bright now, full daylight. Smoke drifted across the snowfields. Shell craters dotted the landscape like pockmarks. In the distance, perhaps a kilometer away, black shapes moved. German infantry, advancing in loose skirmish lines. Behind them, the angular silhouettes of Tiger tanks. Emmett hefted the wire spool, positioned it on his left shoulder where he could control the feed. The telephone clipped to his belt, Thompson across his back. Everything balanced. Everything positioned exactly as he'd carried hunting gear through Kentucky forests. Weight distributed, ready to move. "Stay behind me," he told Danny. "Watch the wire. If it snags, call out. Don't stop. Don't look back. Just run." "Understood." And Danny, "Yeah? If I fall, leave me. Get the phone back to Briggs. Promise me." Danny's face hardened. "I promise." Emmett nodded, turned toward the field, toward 400 yards of open ground under German artillery, toward a shallow ditch somewhere out there that would become his home for the next 3 hours, toward 96 men who didn't know yet that they were going to die. He took a breath, remembered his father's voice, remembered Kentucky mornings before dawn, remembered the feel of dewy grass against his belly as he crawled into position, remembered the patience, the stillness, the art of becoming invisible. "Ready?" Danny asked. "Ready." They ran. Emmett ran like he'd learned to run as a child. Not sprinting, not panicked, but steady, ground-eating, efficient. His hip protested with every step, but held. The torn stitches burned. He ignored it. Focused on the wire unspooling from his shoulder. Focused on the ground ahead. Focused on the next crater, the next fold in the terrain, the next piece of cover. Behind him, Danny's boots pounded snow. The kid was keeping pace, staying 15 meters back like ordered. Good. Ahead, an 88mm shell exploded, 50 yards to the left. Black smoke and snow geysered up. The concussion hit like a wall. Emmett staggered, kept moving. The wire sang as it unspooled. A thin, olive-drab line stretching back toward the command post. A lifeline to safety. Another explosion. Closer. 30 yards right. Shrapnel whined overhead. Something hot kissed Emmett's cheek. He tasted blood. Kept running. The wire caught on something. Went taut. Emmett stopped. Turned. 20 yards back, the wire had snagged on a broken fence post. Danny was already there. Freed it. Waved Emmett forward. They ran. 100 yards. 200. Emmett's lungs burned. His hip was liquid fire now. He could feel warm blood soaking through his trousers where the stitches had torn completely. The wound was open again, bleeding freely. Didn't matter. Keep moving. Another 50 yards. Another 100. Machine gun fire chattered. Bullets cracked past. High. The German gunners couldn't see them clearly through the smoke, were firing blind. Emmett altered course, angled toward a cluster of shell craters, used them for cover. 300 yards now. The German line was visible. Individual soldiers, helmets, rifles. A Tiger tank's long 88mm gun barrel swinging slowly left, searching for targets. Emmett dropped into a crater. Danny slid in behind him. They lay there, panting. Emmett checked the wire. Still feeding smoothly, still trailing back toward the American line, still his navigation system. 50 more yards, he gasped. "See that irrigation ditch? That's where we're going." Danny looked. The ditch ran perpendicular to the German advance, maybe a foot deep, a foot and a half at most. It would provide minimal cover, but it was forward of the American line. It had sight lines to the German position. It would work. "That's not deep enough," Danny said. "It's what we've got." "Emmett, you'll be exposed. They'll see you." "No, they won't." "How can you?" "Because I know how to disappear. Come on." They ran the last 50 yards. The wire sang behind them. 400 yards total. Exactly as Emmett had planned. Exactly as far as the wire would reach. They were past the American line now, 30 meters past it, in no man's land, in the space between armies where nothing lived and everything died. The irrigation ditch was shallow. Snow had drifted into it, frozen solid. Emmett kicked the snow loose, cleared a space just wide enough for his body, lay down. The ditch was 12 inches deep. He was 5'5" and weighed 120 pounds. When he lay flat, his back was still exposed above the ditch line. His head, his shoulders, Anyone looking directly at him would see. But that's not how you hid. You didn't hide by being invisible. You hid by being uninteresting, by being another lump of snow, another shadow, another piece of frozen earth that the eye passed over without thinking. Jesus, Danny breathed. Emmett, they're going to see you. No, they'll look at me and see snow. Get to that ditch 15 meters back, deeper one. Get down and don't move. But that's an order, Private. Go. Danny went, disappeared into a slightly deeper ditch to the east. Emmett was alone. He unclipped the TA312 telephone, connected the wire leads, cranked the generator. The phone crackled to life. Command, this is Ghost. Do you read? Static. Then Briggs's voice, clear, strong. Ghost, this is Command. Read you 5 by 5. What's your position? 400 yards forward of the CP, 30 meters past the forward line. I have eyes on the German advance, ready to call fire missions. A pause, then. Ghost, confirm position. You're 30 meters past our line? Confirmed. I'm in no man's land. I have clear sight lines, minimal cover, but I can see everything from here. Ghost, you understand that puts you 70 yards closer to the enemy than our defensive positions. I understand, sir. That's why you need to listen carefully to my fire missions. I'm going to walk you onto targets, starting with the Tiger tanks. Stand by. Emmett raised his head, just an inch, just enough to see over the lip of the ditch. Before him, spread across 500 yards of snowfield, the German attack unfolded. Infantry in the center, perhaps 200 in the first wave, moving in platoon-strength formations, 50 meters between each platoon. Good dispersion, good discipline. These weren't green troops. These were veterans, Eastern Front probably, men who knew how to fight, how to advance under fire, how to kill. Behind them he could see the reserves, another 400 men, waiting, ready to exploit any breakthrough, 600 total, just like Briggs had said. The Tiger tanks rolled forward on the flanks, 2 left, 2 right, 2 center rear. Massive machines, each one weighing 60 tons, each mounting an 88mm gun that could punch through any American tank at 2,000 yards. Nearly invulnerable from the front, the most feared tank in the war. But Emmett wasn't looking at their armor. He was looking at their tracks, at the vulnerable road wheels, at the thin side armor, at the commander's cupola where an officer stood, binoculars raised, scanning the American line. He was looking at weaknesses, the way his father had taught him to look at a deer. Don't shoot at the body. Too big. Too much can go wrong. Shoot at the joints, the neck, the places where a single round makes the difference. Command, Ghost, fire mission, tank, coordinates 456-789. Target is Tiger tank, stationary, 400 meters from your position. Request HE, 3 rounds, bracket fire. Ghost, command, shot out. 5 seconds, 10, then the whistle. The rising scream of shells inbound. 3 100 5mm rounds arcing through the morning sky. The first shell hit 30 yards short. The second hit 20 yards long. The third hit 5 yards from the Tiger's left track. The tank lurched, stopped. The track had been severed. 60 tons of steel rendered immobile. The crew bailed out, ran toward other cover. Command, Ghost, hit. Adjust fire, walk 3 rounds up 50 yards. Infantry formation in the open. Ghost, command, shot out. The shells came again. This time they fell among the German infantry. Men scattered, men fell, men died. Black uniforms against white snow. Red blood spreading. Emmett called the next target, and the next, and the next. His voice stayed calm, professional, detached, like he was calling coyotes for a farmer back in Pike County. Like this was just another hunt, just another day of work. But his hands shook when he lowered the phone. His breath came fast. His heart hammered against his ribs. because he wasn't hunting animals. He was hunting men. Men with families, men with hopes, men who'd been boys once, learning to hunt in German forests the way he'd learned in Kentucky forests. Men who were dying because he was good at what he did. He pushed the thought down, focused on the math. However many Germans died saved 412 Americans. That was the trade. That was the equation. That was what survival meant. You make the hard choice. Accept the cost. Emmett Leland Rafferty settled deeper into the frozen ditch. The wire stretched behind him. 400 yards of copper cable connecting him to safety, to his brothers, to home, and he called fire from the sky. Hour 1, 9 a.m. The German advance had stalled. Major Ernst Keller stood beside his command half-track, watching his carefully planned assault disintegrate into chaos. 3 Tigers immobilized, 2 platoons shattered by artillery, 40 men dead in the first 30 minutes. Someone was watching. Someone was calling perfect fire missions. Someone who could see his every move. "Radio," Keller snapped. His operator handed him the handset. "All units, this is Adler. Enemy has forward observer in advanced position, likely dug in somewhere between our line and theirs. All platoon leaders detail 2 men each to sweep forward positions. Find him. Kill him. Now." He lowered the radio, raised his binoculars, scanned the snowfield between the lines. Shell craters, frozen earth, low brush, dead ground. Plenty of places to hide. But where? Where would I position myself, he thought. Where would I go if I needed to see everything and survive? His eyes tracked across the terrain, stopped on an irrigation ditch running east-west, approximately 30 meters forward of the American line. Shallow, maybe a foot deep, barely cover at all. Too obvious, he decided. No one would be stupid enough to use that. Not enough protection. He moved his binoculars on. Behind him, his infantry began their sweep. Emmett lay absolutely still, his cheek pressed against frozen earth. His right hand rested on the telephone, his left hand on the wire. He breathed through his nose, slow, controlled, the way he'd breathed waiting for turkeys. The German advance was measured, organized. They'd started 400 yards away at their own forward positions. Now, after 40 minutes of artillery harassment, they'd closed to 300 yards from the American line, which meant 270 yards from Emmett's exposed position. Still too far for small arms, close enough to see faces through the smoke. 50 yards away, German soldiers moved through the haze. 3 of them, spread in a search line, carrying Kar 98K rifles, stopping, looking, moving forward, stopping again. They were hunting him. Emmett didn't move, didn't blink. His eyes tracked them without moving his head. Peripheral vision, another hunting skill. You don't look directly at prey, you look near it. Let your peripheral vision catch movement. Because direct stares are felt, animals sense them. So do men. The nearest German was 30 yards away now. 25. 20. Emmett's finger rested on the telephone crank. One turn would put him in contact with command. One whispered word would bring artillery down. But cranking the phone would make noise, would create movement, would give away his position. So he waited. The German soldier stopped 10 yards from the ditch. Young, maybe 19, blonde hair visible beneath his helmet. He was looking right at Emmett's position, right at the shallow ditch, right at the place where a man in olive drab uniform lay against olive drab earth, in brown winter grass and white snow. The soldier's eyes passed over the ditch, moved on, came back, stopped. Emmett didn't breathe. The German took one step forward, then another. 5 yards now, close enough that Emmett could see the frost on his collar, could see the manufacturer's stamp on his rifle, could see the fear in his eyes. The soldier was afraid. Good. Afraid men made mistakes. Afraid men saw what they expected to see. And this soldier expected to find an observer in better cover. in a deeper position, not lying exposed in a shallow irrigation ditch like a fool. The German's boot came down 2 yards from Emmett's head. Then a voice called out in German, sharp, commanding. The soldier turned, responded, moved away toward the voice. Emmett waited until he was gone. Then slowly, carefully, he cranked the telephone. Once, twice. Command, Ghost, he whispered. Ghost, command, go ahead. They're sweeping for me. 3-man teams. I count 6 teams visible. Request fire mission on my position, minus 30 meters west. HE and smoke mix. Create obscuration. Ghost, that's danger close to your position. I know. Fire for effect. Shot out. The shells came 30 seconds later, high explosive and white phosphorus smoke. The HE rounds detonated in airbursts, scattering shrapnel across the search teams. Men screamed. Men fell. The white phosphorus rounds burst in thick white smoke rolled across the battlefield, obscuring everything. Perfect. Emmett cranked the phone again. Command, Ghost. Good effect. German infantry taking casualties. They're pulling back to regroup. I count first wave approximately 150 remaining effectives. Reserves still at 450. 3 Tigers still mobile. Recommend continued interdiction fire on rally points. Ghost, command, Roger. Be advised you've been calling fire for 40 minutes. How's your ammunition for that Thompson? Emmett glanced at the submachine gun beside him. 30-round magazine inserted. 2 more magazines in his belt. 90 rounds total. Sufficient for close defense. Ghost, if they find you, 90 rounds won't be enough. Then I better make sure they don't find me. A pause. Then Briggs's voice, lower, more personal. Rafferty, Danny reported in. He says you're exposed up there. Says you've got minimal cover. Danny should focus on his own position. Rafferty, sir, with respect, I knew what I was signing up for. I'm fine. Now, if you don't mind, I've got Germans to kill. Emmett disconnected before Briggs could respond. He didn't need concern right now. Didn't need someone reminding him that he was lying in a 12-inch ditch with 600 German soldiers trying to find him. He knew. His body knew. Every nerve screamed at him to run, to get out, to follow the wire back to safety. But the battalion depended on him staying exactly where he was, so he stayed. Hour 2, 10 a.m. The smoke cleared, the German infantry reformed. Keller watched from his command position, binoculars steady. His casualties were mounting, 50 dead now, another 30 wounded. The Americans were paying for every meter in blood, but they were still advancing, slowly, carefully, using the smoke and terrain, moving in short rushes from cover to cover, the way good infantry moved, the way men who wanted to live moved. And somewhere out there, that American observer was still calling fire. Keller had a choice. Pull back, regroup, wait for reinforcements. The cautious choice, the smart choice, or push forward, accept the casualties, break through before the Americans could organize a proper defense. The aggressive choice, the Eastern Front choice. He'd survived 3 years on the Eastern Front by being aggressive, by hitting hard and fast and never giving the enemy time to think, by accepting losses because the alternative was worse. All units, he said into the radio, advance, push through the artillery, close with the American line. Once we're in close combat, their observer can't help them. His infantry moved forward, the reserves now committed, 500 men pushing toward the American positions, grim-faced, determined, veterans who knew that forward was the only way home. Emmett watched them come, measured their advance, counted the seconds it would take them to reach various waypoints, the fence line, the burned farmhouse, the cluster of shell craters 100 meters from his position. They'd closed to 200 yards from the American line now, which put them 170 yards from Emmett. Getting closer, getting dangerous. He called fire missions, adjusted, called again. The American artillery responded perfectly. Shells walked across the German advance. Men died, men were wounded, but they kept coming. 150 yards from the American line. 120 yards from Emmett. Emmett's hand found the wire. He traced it back toward the American line. 400 yards of copper and insulation. His navigation system. If he had to retreat, that wire would guide him. Even through smoke, even under fire. Just follow it back. But not yet. Not while he could still see, still call fire, still stop the advance. 100 yards from the American line. 70 yards from Emmett. The telephone rang. Not the crank, an actual incoming call. Emmett picked up. "Ghost, this is Danny." The kid's voice was tight, scared. "Emmett, they're too close. You need to pull back." "Negative, I still have sight lines." "They're going to find you." "Then I'll deal with it. Stay in position." "Emmett!" A burst of machine gun fire cut across the ditch, 10 feet to Emmett's left. Bullets cracked overhead, threw up snow and frozen earth. Someone had spotted something. Not him, not yet, but close. "Danny, stay down. Don't move. I'm calling danger close fire." "What?" "Emmett, you'll—" "I'll be fine, trust me. Ghost out." Emmett cranked the phone. "Command, Ghost. Enemy infantry at 70 yards from my position and closing. That's 40 yards from our line. Request artillery fire. Target coordinates 456-795. Danger close. HE only." Silence on the other end. Then, "Ghost, say again?" "That's within 100 yards of your position." "Affirmative. I'm dug in. Low profile. I can survive the overpressure." "The Germans are in the open. They can't." "Ghost, that's extremely dangerous." "Sir, it's math. If they get past me, they hit your line. This is the only way to stop them." Another pause. Longer this time. Emmett could imagine Briggs at the Fire Direction Center. Could imagine him calculating, weighing one life against many. "Shot out," Briggs said finally. His voice was strained. Emmett pressed himself into the bottom of the ditch, covered his head with his arms, gripped the wire with his left hand, his anchor. The shells came. Not a whistle this time, a scream. A banshee wail that tore through the air and ended in thunder. The first round hit 60 yards away. The concussion was a physical thing. A hammer blow that drove the air from Emmett's lungs. His ears rang. His head pounded. The second round hit 50 yards away. Closer. Shrapnel whined overhead. Something hot scored across his back. He bit down on a scream. The third round hit 40 yards away. The world became noise, became pressure, became a chaos of snow and earth and metal fragments traveling at supersonic speeds. Emmett couldn't hear, couldn't think, could only hold on, hold the wire, hold his position, hold himself together while the sky fell around him. Then silence. Not real silence. His ears were ruined. Blood trickled from his left ear. But relative silence, the absence of explosions, the absence of death raining from above. Emmett raised his head, slowly, carefully. Before him, where German soldiers had been advancing 70 yards away, there was nothing, just craters, just smoke, just shapes that might have been men once. 25 more Germans lay dead or wounded, 25 more who wouldn't reach the American line. He picked up the phone. His hands shook. "Command, Ghost. Fire effective. Enemy advance halted. Casualties estimated 25 this strike. Running total approximately 75 enemy KIA. They're regrouping, preparing final assault. Ghost, are you injured?" "Minor shrapnel, back and leg. Nothing serious." "Ghost, you need to fall back. You've done enough." "Negative, still have visibility, still mission capable." "Rafferty, that's an order. Fall back to the line." "Sir, with respect, if I fall back now, the Germans will advance. They'll reach your position within 20 minutes. I'm staying." "God damn it, Rafferty." "Sir, I have the wire. 400 yards back to you. If I need to retreat, I can follow it even through smoke. I'll be fine. But right now, I'm your eyes. I'm your targeting. I'm the only thing keeping those tigers from rolling over your position. Let me do my job." Static. Then Briggs's voice resigned. "All right, but the second it gets too hot, you follow that wire home. Understood?" "Understood, sir." Emmett set down the phone, checked his wounds. The shrapnel hit on his back was superficial, painful but not deep. The leg wound was worse, a 2-inch gash across his right thigh. Blood soaked his trousers, but the bleeding was slowing. Would clot soon. He was functional, still had his eyes, still had his hands, still had the wire, still had Germans to kill. Keller stood beside a Tiger tank, watching his assault falter. 75 casualties, an eighth of his force. The American artillery was devastating, precise, unrelenting, and it all came from one man, one observer, one set of eyes that could see everything and survived everything. "Major," his radio operator approached. "Sir, the men are saying that observer is a ghost, that he can't be killed, that he sees through smoke and knows where every shell will fall." "He's not a ghost," Keller said. "He's a man, a very well-trained man in a very good position, but he's still just a man." "How do we find him?" Keller looked at the battlefield, at the smoke, at the craters, at the impossible geometry of death that the American had drawn across his advance. Then his eyes fell on something, a thin line, dark against white snow, running from the American position forward into no man's land. Telephone wire. "There," Keller said, pointing. "Do you see it? The wire." His operator squinted. "I see it, sir." That's how he's communicating. Radio would be too unreliable in this terrain. Too much interference from the artillery, so he's using landline. And that wire leads directly to him. "So we follow the wire?" "No, we cut it, send a team, cut the wire, then he's blind and deaf. Then we advance and kill him." "Yes, sir." 3 soldiers moved forward through the smoke, low, fast, heading toward the wire that stretched across no man's land like a thin thread of hope. Emmett saw them coming, 3 Germans, moving with purpose, heading directly toward his wire. They'd figured it out. Smart. Keller was smart. Eastern Front commander for certain. Someone who understood modern warfare. Someone who knew that communications were as important as bullets. The Germans reached the wire, 50 yards from Emmett's position. One of them knelt, pulled out wire cutters, positioned the blades around the wire. Emmett cranked the telephone. "Command, Ghost. Enemy attempting to cut my communications wire. Coordinates 456-791. 3-man team. Request immediate fire mission." "Ghost, command. Shot out." The shells came. 2 105mm rounds, high explosive. They detonated in airbursts directly above the 3 Germans. All 3 went down, didn't get up. But the wire was damaged. A piece of shrapnel had severed it 20 yards from Emmett's position. His lifeline, his navigation system. Cut. Emmett grabbed the wire ends, pulled them toward him. His hands worked automatically, the way they'd worked 1,000 times on snare lines in Kentucky when rabbits had torn them loose. Strip the insulation with his knife, twist the copper conductors together, tight, secure, wrap with friction tape from his pack. 30 seconds. The wire was repaired. His hands were shaking. Not from fear, from the realization of how close he'd come to being stranded. Cut off. Lost in no man's land with no way to navigate back through the smoke and chaos. He cranked the phone. "Command, Ghost. Wire repaired, still operational." "Ghost, understood. Be advised, enemy is reforming for another push. Count approximately 475 infantry remaining. 2 Tigers mobile. Intelligence suggests this will be their final assault. They're going to throw everything at us." 475 men, coming right at him, and he was lying in a 12-inch ditch with 90 rounds of .45 caliber ammunition and nowhere to run. Emmett looked at the wire, at the thin line stretching back towards safety. 400 yards. He could run it in 3 minutes if he had to, could follow it through smoke and chaos and artillery fire, could make it back. But if he ran, the Germans would advance, would hit the American line before artillery could stop them, would break through, would surround the battalion. His brothers would die. He looked at his hands, at the blood on them, German blood mixed with his own, at the telephone, at the wire, at the tools that made him dangerous, made him deadly, made him the difference between survival and annihilation. His father's voice echoed in his memory from a Kentucky morning 20 years ago, from a forest clearing where a 6-year-old boy held a dead rabbit and cried because killing hurt, even when it was necessary. "Son," his father had said, "when you hunt, you do it clean. You do it quick. You don't make them suffer. And you don't ever forget that what you kill had a life, had a family, had a right to live. But sometimes you got to choose. Your family eats or that rabbit lives. And when it's your family, you make the hard choice. You make the choice that keeps your people alive, and you carry the weight of it after. That's what being a man means." Emmett picked up the telephone. "Command, Ghost. I'm staying. I need you to listen carefully to what I'm about to say. The Germans are going to push hard in the next assault. They're going to get close, very close, maybe close enough that normal fire missions won't work." "Ghost, what are you saying?" "I'm saying there might come a point where the only way to stop them is to call fire directly on my position. Not 50 yards away, not 20 yards, right on top of me. And I need you to be prepared to do that." "Ghost, negative. Absolutely not. I won't authorize." "Sir, it's not your decision. It's mine. I'm the one in this ditch. I'm the one who can see what's coming. And I'm telling you right now, if it comes to it, if it's the only way to stop them, I'm going to call fire on myself. And you're going to execute that fire mission. Because that's the job. That's what forward observers do. We call the fire even when it means we might die. Especially then, because our lives don't matter as much as the mission." Silence on the phone. Long seconds. Then Briggs's voice, broken. "Rafferty, I can't ask you to do that." "You're not asking, sir. I'm volunteering. Just promise me something." "What?" "Promise me you'll follow through. Promise me that if I call fire on my own position, you won't hesitate, won't second guess. You'll fire the mission, and you'll kill every German in the target area, even if it means hitting me too. Can you promise me that?" More silence. Then, "I promise." "Thank you, sir." Ghost out. Emmett set down the phone, checked the Thompson. 30 rounds in the magazine, 2 spare magazines. 90 rounds total against 475 Germans. Not enough. Not nearly enough. But he had something better than bullets. He had wire. He had artillery. He had 400 yards of copper cable connecting him to the most devastating firepower in the American arsenal. And he had a choice. The same choice his father had talked about. The choice between one life and many lives. Between himself and his brothers. It wasn't really a choice at all. Hour 3, 11 a.m. The German infantry came in a final, desperate rush. The reserves committed, 150 men in the assault wave, the rest providing covering fire from positions 200 yards back, moving fast, no longer worried about casualties, no longer worried about artillery, just moving forward because forward was the only direction that mattered. Keller ran with them, left his command post, left his radio, picked up a rifle and joined the assault. Because this was it. This was the moment. Break through here or fail. Win or die. Simple as that. The Germans had pushed to within 30 yards of the American defensive line, which put them 4.5 meters from Emmett, close enough to hear their breathing, close enough to smell tobacco on their uniforms, close enough to see individual faces, young faces, old faces, scared faces, determined faces. And in that moment, Keller saw it. The irrigation ditch. The shallow depression that his binoculars had dismissed as too obvious, too exposed. And in that ditch, barely visible, a shape. A man-shaped shadow against earth and snow, lying absolutely still. A telephone next to him. A wire running back toward the American position. "There!" Keller shouted. "The observer! In the ditch! Kill him!" 20 German soldiers altered course, heading directly for Emmett's position. Rifles raised, moving fast, close now. 10 meters, 7, 5. Emmett saw them coming, picked up the telephone. His hand was steady, his voice was calm. "Command, Ghost, enemy infantry at 5 meters in closing. I'm calling my final fire mission." "Ghost, fall back. Follow your wire. Get out of there." "Negative, sir. No time. They're too close. If I move, they'll see me. If they see me, they'll kill me before I make 10 feet. This is the only way." "Ghost." "Sir, it's been an honor." Emmett cranked the telephone, took a breath, spoke clearly into the handset. 6 words that would define the rest of his life, however long that was. "Blanket my position. Fire for effect." Silence. Then Briggs's voice, broken, crying. "Shot out. God forgive me. Shot out." Emmett set down the phone. His right hand found the wire, gripped it tight. His lifeline, his anchor, his trail back to the world. His left hand found the Thompson, pulled it close. If he was going to die, he'd die fighting. Die doing his job. Die the way his brothers needed him to die. The Germans were 4.5 meters away, so close Emmett could see the stitching on their uniforms, could see the frost on their eyebrows, could see the surprise in their eyes as they finally spotted him. "Amerikaner!" one of them shouted. Rifles swung toward him. He closed his eyes, thought of Kentucky, of morning mist over forests, of his father's patient hands teaching him to tie knots, of Lorraine's smile, of home. The shells came. Not a whistle, a scream. A freight train made of steel and high explosive. 200 105mm shells launched in a rolling barrage. 75 81mm mortar rounds. Every gun in the American sector firing simultaneously. All aimed at a single point. Grid coordinates 456-789. Emmett Leland Rafferty's position. The world ended. Fire, pressure, noise beyond hearing. The air itself tearing apart. The earth rising up. The sky falling down. Everything mixing. Everything shattering. Emmett pressed himself into the bottom of the ditch. Held the wire like a drowning man holds a rope. Felt the explosions walk across his position. Over him. Around him. Felt shrapnel sing overhead, felt the ground shake, felt his body compress under impossible overpressure. The ditch saved him. The shallow 12-inch depression that should have been no protection at all. The shells detonated above him, in the air, on the surface. The shrapnel passed over. The blast waves compressed him, but didn't crush him. The fire burned around him, but not through him. And in the chaos, as shells exploded within meters of his position, Emmett did something impossible. He moved. Still gripping the wire with his left hand, he used the smoke and fire and confusion to crawl. 5 meters, 7 meters, 10 meters, following the wire backward, using it as his guide, using the explosions as cover, using the skills his father had taught him about moving unseen through chaos. By the time the barrage ended, he was 15 meters from his original position, in a deeper crater, still exposed, still in danger, but alive. 10 seconds that lasted forever. Then silence. The silence was absolute, not true silence. Emmett's ears were destroyed. Blood ran from both of them now. The world was muffled, distant, like being underwater, like being buried alive, like being dead, except his heart still beat and his lungs still pulled air. And somewhere in the ringing emptiness, His brain still insisted he was alive. He didn't move for 30 seconds. Couldn't move. His body was lead. His limbs were concrete. Shock, maybe, or the body's last desperate attempt to protect itself by shutting down everything that wasn't essential to staying alive. His right hand still gripped the wire, tight enough to hurt, tight enough that the copper had cut through his glove and into his palm. Blood mixed with earth. His blood. German blood. American blood. All the same color when it soaked into snow. Slowly, carefully, Emmett opened his eyes. Smoke. Thick, gray smoke that tasted of cordite and burned earth and things that had been men. He couldn't see 5 feet, couldn't see anything except the wire in his hand and the bottom of the crater and his own breath rising white in the frozen air. He was alive. Impossibly, inexplicably, against every law of probability and physics and common sense, he was alive. His hands moved, found the telephone, lifted it to his ear. The handset was cracked, scorched. But when he cranked the generator, it crackled to life. "Command." His voice was a rasp, a whisper. "Command, this is Ghost." Static. Then Briggs's voice. Distant, unbelieving. "Ghost? Rafferty? Is that you?" "Confirmed. Ghost is alive." Jesus Christ, Rafferty. We all thought." "I'm alive, sir. Use the barrage as cover. Followed the wire to a safer position. Enemy destroyed. Requesting smoke to cover my egress." "Ghost, stand by. Don't move. We're sending a patrol to get you." "Negative, sir. I can walk. Just need smoke." "Rafferty, you just survived an artillery barrage on your own position. You're not walking anywhere. That's an order." But Emmett was already moving. His body protested. Everything hurt. His hip was agony. His back burned where shrapnel had scored him. His legs shook. But he could move, could function, could follow the wire home. He picked up the Thompson, checked it, dirt-clogged, useless. He dropped it, wouldn't need it anyway. The Germans were dead or retreating. The immediate threat was over. He gripped the wire with both hands, started crawling backward, following it, using it as his guide through the smoke, through the chaos, through the aftermath of hell. The smoke began to clear. Emmett stopped, stared. Bodies, German bodies, everywhere, scattered across a 100-yard radius, some intact, some not, some still moving, wounded, dying, calling for help in German that Emmett couldn't understand, but didn't need to. Pain sounds the same in every language. 41 men. He'd called fire on 41 men in that final barrage. Added to the earlier casualties, 30 in hour 1, 25 in hour 2, 96 total. 96 human beings who'd woken up this morning thinking about home, about families, about the war ending and going back to whatever life they'd had before. All dead because Emmett Rafferty knew how to tie string to trees and hunt turkeys and lie very still in shallow places. He kept crawling, following the wire, hand over hand, 20 yards, 50, 100. The smoke thinned. He could see the American line ahead, men in helmets watching, rifles ready. Someone shouted, someone else waved. Danny appeared out of nowhere. The kid's face was gray, eyes wide. He grabbed Emmett under the arms, helped him up. Emmett's legs barely held. "Jesus, Emmett, Jesus Christ, I thought you were dead. We all thought." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're bleeding. Your ears are bleeding. Your back." "I'm fine." Emmett pushed away, stood on his own. His legs held, barely, but they held. "The wire. Need to recover the wire." "What?" "Emmett, forget the wire. We need to get you to medical." "No." Emmett turned, started walking back toward his position, following the wire forward this time. "Need to recover it. Might need it again." "Emmett, that's insane. You can't." But Emmett was already walking, following the wire forward, back toward the ditch where he'd spent 3 hours, back toward the place where 96 men had died, back toward the telephone that still sat in the mud. He reached his original position, picked up the TA-312, disconnected it, started winding the wire back onto the spool. Slow, methodical, the way his father had taught him to coil rope. Keep it neat, keep it organized. You never knew when you'd need it again. Danny stood beside him, silent now, understanding maybe, or just too shocked to argue. "You called artillery on yourself," Danny said finally. "Yes." "You could have died." "Yes." "Why?" Emmett kept winding the wire, hand over hand, 400 yards of copper and insulation that had kept him alive. That had been his lifeline, that had guided him through hell and back. "Because the battalion would have been overrun if I didn't," Emmett said. "Because that's the job. Because my father taught me that sometimes you make the hard choice. You accept the cost, and you carry it after." "Can you carry it?" Emmett looked at the German bodies, at the young faces, at the old faces, at the faces that would never go home. "I don't know," he said quietly, "but I don't have a choice. None of us do. We just keep walking forward and hope we remember how to be human when it's over." They reached the command post 20 minutes later. Briggs stood outside, waiting. His face was carved from stone, eyes red. When he saw Emmett, something broke in his expression. Relief, grief, guilt, all mixed together. "Rafferty." "Sir, you're alive." "Yes, sir. I gave the order to fire on your position." "I know, sir. I asked you to. I could have killed you." "You did your job, sir. I did mine. That's all." Briggs stared at him, then incredibly pulled him into a rough embrace. Emmett stood rigid, uncomfortable, not used to this, not used to officers showing emotion, not used to anyone acknowledging what had just happened. "You saved them," Briggs said into his ear. "The entire battalion. You saved all of them." "Just followed the wire back, sir. That's all." Briggs released him, stepped back, composed himself. "I'm recommending you for the Medal of Honor. What you did today?" "No, sir." "What?" "Respectfully, sir, I don't want it. Don't want any medal. Just want to go back to the line, back to my unit, back to doing my job." "Rafferty, you can't be serious. What you did was extraordinary, historic. You deserve—" "I don't deserve anything, sir. I just used a trick my father taught me. String between trees, that's all. Anyone could have done it." "No," Briggs said firmly. "No, anyone couldn't have. I've been in this war 3 years. I've seen hundreds of men, thousands, and I've never seen anyone do what you just did. Lie in a ditch for 3 hours calling fire within meters of your position, then call it directly on yourself, then survive, then walk back like it was just another day." Emmett said nothing. What was there to say? That he'd been terrified? That he'd nearly run a dozen times? That his hands had shaken and his heart had hammered and every instinct had screamed at him to follow the wire back to safety? That he'd stayed not because he was brave, but because running would have meant living with the knowledge that 412 men died because he wasn't willing to risk one? "Go to medical," Briggs said finally. "Get those wounds treated. That's an order. And Rafferty—" "Sir? Thank you. I know it doesn't mean much. I know it doesn't change what you had to do. But thank you. For my men. For keeping them alive." Emmett nodded, turned, started walking toward the medical tent. Danny fell in beside him. Neither spoke. What was there to say? Behind them, Colonel Briggs stood alone, staring at the battlefield, at the smoke, at the bodies, at the place where one man had held the line for 3 hours, using nothing but a telephone and a piece of wire. 96, Briggs whispered to himself. 96 Germans, battalion saved, all because a Kentucky farm boy knew how to follow a string home. 10 days later, February 3rd, 1945, The battalion had advanced 5 kilometers. The Colmar pocket was collapsing. German resistance was crumbling. The end was coming. Everyone could feel it, could smell it in the air. Liberation, victory, home. Emmett walked point on a patrol through a small village. His hip had healed enough to move. The stitches had been replaced, the wounds bandaged properly. His hearing was returning, slowly. The ringing would never go away completely, but he could function, could fight, could do his job. The village was quiet, too quiet. Empty windows staring down like dead eyes. No civilians, no movement. Just silence in snow, in the feeling of being watched. Emmett raised his fist. The patrol stopped. He listened. There, a sound, metal on metal, coming from the church ahead, 50 yards. He gestured. 2 men left, 2 right. Himself and Danny straight up the middle. Basic squad tactics, envelop and clear. They moved, silent, efficient. Reached the church. Emmett tested the door, unlocked. He pushed it open, stepped inside. Darkness, cold air, the smell of old stone and older prayers. And movement. There, in the shadows near the altar. "Come out," Emmett said in English. Then, haltingly, in the German he'd learned from prisoners, "Kommen Sie heraus, Hände hoch." A figure emerged, tall, gray uniform, officer's insignia, hands raised, moving slowly, carefully. Major Ernst Keller. The 2 men stared at each other. Predator and prey, hunter and hunted. The observer and the commander. The man who had called death from the sky and the man who had sent 96 men into it. "You," Keller said in accented English, "you are the observer." "Yes." "I thought so. I saw you. Through binoculars, after the barrage, following your wire back. Very clever. The wire as navigation system. I should have thought of it. You tried to cut it." "Yes, my mistake. I underestimated American ingenuity." Keller smiled, bitter, tired. 96 men. That was you? Emmett said nothing. Didn't owe this man explanations. Didn't owe him understanding. Keller studied him, then nodded once. 96-1. You were efficient, American. Respect. "Take him away," Emmett told Danny. Danny moved forward with flex cuffs, secured Keller's hands, led him toward the door. Keller paused at the threshold, looked back at Emmett. "You will go home after this war, yes? Back to America, back to whatever life you had before." Emmett said nothing. "You will try to forget," Keller continued quietly. "Try to become normal again. But you won't. Because men like us, men who make the impossible choices, we carry it forever. The faces, the numbers. Remember that, American. Remember that surviving is sometimes harder than dying." Danny pulled him away. The rest of the patrol followed. Emmett stood alone in the church, in the cold stone silence, in the space between killing and living, between war and peace, between the man he'd been and the man he was becoming. He pulled out the wire spool, the same one he'd used on January 24th, 400 yards of copper cable that had saved his life. He'd carried it every day since, kept it in his pack, his talisman, his reminder. He wound the wire around his hand, unwound it, wound it again, an unconscious gesture, a habit forming, the beginning of a ritual that would define the rest of his life. February 3rd, 1945, Emmett Rafferty led an urban assault, killed 12 Germans in close combat, captured 75 prisoners, earned his 4th Silver Star. The citation would say he displayed extraordinary heroism and tactical brilliance. It wouldn't mention that he'd vomited behind a wall after the fighting stopped, that his hands had shaken for an hour, that he'd sat alone in a destroyed building and counted the bodies, 12 more added to 96, and wondered when the counting would stop, if it would ever stop. 3 months later, May 8, 1945, VE Day, the war in Europe ended. Church bells rang across the continent. Men celebrated, cried, embraced, fired weapons into the air, wrote letters home saying they'd survived. They were coming home. The nightmare was finally over. Emmett sat alone on a hillside overlooking the Rhine, watching the sun set over Germany, watching darkness fall on a continent that had been at war for 6 years, watching an era end. In his hands, the wire spool. He wound the wire around his fingers, unwound it, wound it again. The copper was stained now, dirt and blood and the residue of 3 months of combat. But it still worked, still held, still could guide a man through chaos if he knew how to follow it. Danny found him there an hour later, sat down beside him. Neither spoke for a long time. "It's over," Danny said finally. "Yes." "We won." "Yes." "We're going home." "Yes." Danny looked at the wire in Emmett's hands. "You still carrying that?" "Yes." "Why?" Emmett didn't answer for a long time. "How did you explain it? How did you put into words the feeling that this wire, this simple, ordinary piece of equipment, had become more important than any weapon, had become his anchor, his proof that even in chaos you could find your way back?" "My father taught me to mark trails," Emmett said quietly. "String between trees, so you can always find your way home. And this wire, it brought me back from that ditch on January 24th. And maybe if I keep it, it'll bring me back from this war. Really back. Back to who I was before." "Do you think that's possible, going back?" "No, but I'm going to try anyway." They sat in silence, watching darkness fall, watching the war end, watching their youth disappear into the smoke of burning Europe. 96, Danny said, plus the 12 on February 3rd, plus all the others these 3 months. "How many do you think, total?" Emmett had counted. Of course he'd counted. Every night, every face he could remember, every coordinate he'd called in, every fire mission he'd directed. The mathematics of survival, the terrible arithmetic. 137 confirmed kills, he said. Maybe more. Artillery makes it hard to know for certain. Jesus. Don't make it sound impressive. Don't make it sound like something to celebrate. "I wasn't going to. Danny shook his head. "I just don't know how you live with it." "You don't. You just keep walking forward and hope you remember how to be human when you get where you're going." Summer, 1945, Pike County, Kentucky. The train pulled into the station at noon. Emmett stepped off, alone, his duffel bag over one shoulder, his uniform still on, the wire spool tucked carefully in his pack where no one could see it. The platform was crowded. Families, children, banners saying, "Welcome home," and "Thank you for your service," and "God bless America." A brass band played somewhere, off-key but enthusiastic. Emmett walked through the crowd, looking for one face, just one. And there she was, Lorraine, standing at the back of the platform, away from the crowds, away from the celebration, just waiting, patient, the way she'd waited 23 months while he was overseas. She was 23 now, still beautiful, but different somehow, older, wiser. The war had aged everyone, even the ones who stayed home. Their eyes met. Emmett stopped walking, couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but stare at her and remember why he'd survived. Why he'd crawled through artillery barrages and called fire on his own position and killed 137 men to get back to this moment, to this woman, to home. Lorraine walked toward him, slow, careful, like approaching something wild that might bolt. She stopped 3 feet away, studied his face, saw the changes, the lines around his eyes, the gray in his hair that hadn't been there before, the distance in his gaze. "Emmett, Laura, you came home. I promised I would. A lot of men made promises. I keep mine." She moved closer, close enough to touch. Her hand reached up, touched his face, his jaw, his cheek, feeling the realness of him, confirming he was actually there, actually alive, actually home. "I got your letters," she said. "Every one. But they stopped telling me anything after the first few months. You stopped telling me what you were doing, what you were seeing. You just wrote about weather and food and how much you missed home. I didn't want to tell you the rest." "Why not?" "Because then you'd know. You'd know what I'd become, what I'd done. And I needed to believe that there was still something good in the world, something pure, something that war hadn't touched. And that was you." Tears welled in her eyes. "Oh, Emmett, don't. Please don't cry for me. I'm not worth it. You came home. That makes you worth everything." He pulled her close, held her, buried his face in her hair, and for the first time in 23 months, Emmett Rafferty allowed himself to cry, to shake, to feel the weight of everything he'd been holding in, everything he'd been hiding, everything he'd done to get back to this moment. Lorraine held him, said nothing, just held him while he broke. Behind them, the brass band played. Children waved flags. People celebrated. The war was over. The boys were home. Everything could go back to normal now, except nothing would ever be normal again. 1 year later, June 1946, Pike County. Emmett and Lorraine were married in a small church. 20 people in attendance. No military uniforms, no medals, no mention of war, just a simple ceremony, a simple exchange of vows, a simple beginning to whatever came next. That night, their wedding night, Lorraine woke to find Emmett gone from bed. She found him on the porch, 3 in the morning, smoking a cigarette, staring at nothing. "Another nightmare?" she asked. "Yes." "The same one?" "Always the same one." She sat beside him, took his hand. "Tell me." "You don't want to hear it." "I do. I want to know. I want to understand." Emmett was quiet for a long time. Then, "I'm in the ditch, January 24th, and the Germans are coming, and I call the artillery, and the shells fall, and men die. But in the dream I can see their faces, all 96 of them, young, old, scared, brave, human, and they're looking at me, asking me why. Why did I kill them? Why did they have to die? And I don't have an answer. Because the only answer is mathematics. The battalion for 96 Germans. And that's not really an answer at all. But you saved our men." "I know. And if I had to do it again, I would. Same choice, same result. That's what makes it a nightmare. Not that I did it, but that I do it again. That I'm capable of it. Of calling fire on men, on killing, on being good at killing. That's what haunts me, not what I did, what I am." Lorraine squeezed his hand. "You're a man who made impossible choices in impossible circumstances. You're a man who did what needed to be done to save his brothers. That doesn't make you a killer, it makes you a survivor." "Same thing sometimes." "No, it's not. A killer enjoys it. You carry it. That's the difference." They sat in silence, in the dark, in the space between then and now, between war and peace, between the man he'd been and the man he was trying to become. "I bought something today," Emmett said. 36 acres. Good land. Needs work. But it's ours. If you want it." "Of course I want it. I'm going to plant tobacco, maybe some corn, build a life, a normal life, try to move forward. We'll do it together." Emmett pulled the wire spool from his pocket, the same one from January 24th. He'd carried it every day since, kept it close, his talisman, his reminder, his anchor to sanity. "I want to do something," he said, "every year, on January 24th. I want to unspool this wire across our field, walk the line, all 400 yards. Remember." "Remember what?" "That I followed it back once, that it brought me home to you, That even in the worst moments, there's always a trail back if you just know what to follow. Lorraine nodded, understanding maybe, or just accepting. Then we'll do it, every year, together. What Emmett didn't know, what he could never know, was that Lorraine kept a journal, a small, leather-bound notebook hidden in her dresser. Every night after he fell asleep, after the nightmares woke him and she held him and he finally dozed off again, she would light a candle and write. January 26, 1946. Emmett woke screaming at 2:47 a.m. The same dream. The ditch. The shells. The faces. He counted to 96 before I could calm him. He doesn't know I count with him. April 3rd, 1948. He unspooled the wire today, not January 24th, random Tuesday. Walked it twice. Came back hollow-eyed. Didn't speak until evening. The war is still fighting him. September 12th, 1955. Our son asked why Daddy keeps that old wire spool. I said it's special. How do I explain that wire is the only thing keeping his father anchored to this world? January 24th, 1967. 22 years. He walked the wire at dawn. I watch from the window like always. He's 67 now. Still counts to 96. Still whispers their names, the ones he invented because he never knew their real names. Still carries them. August 15th, 1973. Emmett fell today, working the field. Scared me half to death. He's 54, not old, but the war aged him. The wire ritual ages him more each year. 28 years of walking that line. 28 years of carrying 96 ghosts. January 24th, 1985. 40 years. He can barely walk the wire anymore. Arthritis. Bad hip. The old wound from 1945. But he does it anyway. Every step is pain. Every step is penance. I want to tell him to stop, that he's paid enough. But I know he never will. January 24th, 1990. 45 years. I walked with him today. First time. He didn't ask me to. I just did. He cried. We both did. All 400 yards. Together. Counting to 96. Both of us. December 3rd, 1997. Doctor says Emmett's kidneys are failing. Diabetes getting worse. He won't last another year. Tonight he asked me, will you walk the wire for me? After, will you remember them? I said yes, I'll remember. I've been remembering with you for 52 years. 52 years of nights. 52 years of nightmares documented. 52 years of proof that Emmett Leland Rafferty never stopped fighting January 24th, 1945. She never told him about the journal, never showed him the pages, because he needed to believe she didn't see his pain, needed to believe he was hiding it successfully, needed to believe he was protecting her from what he'd become. And she loved him enough to let him believe it. January 24th, 1998. Pike County, Kentucky. Emmett Rafferty lay in a hospital bed, 79 years old, kidney failure, diabetes, the body finally giving out after 8 decades of hard use, hard living, hard remembering. Lorraine sat beside him, 76 now, gray hair, weathered hands, eyes that had watched a good man carry an impossible weight for 52 years and had never once complained about bearing half of it. What day is it? Emmett whispered. January 24th. 53 years. Yes. Did we walk the line this year? No, love. You've been here for 3 days. Too sick to go home. Emmett's hand moved weakly toward his bedside table. Searching. Lorraine knew what he wanted. She pulled out the wire spool. The same one, copper tarnished now. Insulation cracked. But still intact, still functional, still his anchor. She placed it in his hands. His fingers closed around it, weak but sure. I followed it back, he whispered. From the ditch, from the war, from everything. Just followed the wire. Back to you, back to the farm, back to life. I know. 96 men died, Laura. I counted them. Every year, every January 24th, 96. And 412 lived. You saved them, Emmett. You saved all of them. Was it worth it? 137 Germans dead so Americans could live. Was that the right trade? There is no right trade in war. There's only survival. And you survived. You came home. You built a life. You were a good man, a good husband, a good father. That's all that matters. Emmett's breathing slowed. His grip on the wire loosened. His eyes closed. Tell them, he whispered, when I'm gone, tell them it wasn't about medals, about glory. It was just about finding the way back, about doing what needed to be done and carrying it after. Tell them, his breath caught, stopped, restarted, weaker now. Tell them I made it home, that the wire brought me home. To you. That's all. That's everything. I'll tell them, Lorraine promised, tears streaming down her weathered face. I'll tell everyone, I promise. Emmett smiled, small, peaceful, the smile of a man who'd carried a terrible weight for 53 years and was finally setting it down. Good, he breathed. That's good. Thank you, Laura. For everything. For waiting. For staying. For helping me remember how to be human. His eyes closed. His breathing steadied, slowed. And 30 minutes later, at 3:47 p.m., on January 24th, 1998, exactly 53 years after he'd called artillery fire on his own position, Emmett Leland Rafferty died. His hand still held the wire spool. His final expression was peaceful. He'd finally made it all the way home. Danny Foster survived the war, returned to Ohio, married his sweetheart, had 3 children, worked at a steel mill for 40 years, never spoke about combat, never attended reunions, never talked about the day he watched Emmett Rafferty call artillery fire on his own position. But every January 24th, he sent Emmett a letter. Same message every year. Still here because you stayed there. Thank you. Emmett never responded, never acknowledged the letters. But Lorraine found them after he died. 43 letters, bound with string, hidden in the barn with the wire spool. 43 years Danny had thanked him. 43 years Emmett had carried the guilt. Anyway, 20 years later, June 26, 2018, the White House. Lorraine Rafferty sat in a wheelchair in the East Room, 96 years old, frail but fierce, eyes bright with determination, surrounded by her children, her grandchildren, her great-grandchildren, the family that existed because one man had known how to follow a wire home. The president stood at the podium, reading from a citation. His voice carried across the room, formal, official, but somehow inadequate to capture what had really happened 53 years ago in a frozen field in France. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity, at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty, Private First Class Emmett Leland Rafferty distinguished himself by extraordinary heroism on January 24, 1945, near Colmar, France. When his battalion came under heavy assault by a numerically superior German force, Private Rafferty volunteered to advance to a forward observation position to direct artillery fire. Despite severe wounds and minimal cover, he remained in position for 3 hours, calling fire missions that resulted in 96 enemy casualties and the successful defense of American positions. When enemy forces closed to within meters of his location, Private Rafferty called artillery fire directly on his own position, using the barrage as cover to reposition along his communications wire. His actions saved the lives of over 400 American soldiers and turned the tide of the engagement. Private Rafferty's courage, selflessness, and devotion to duty reflect the highest credit upon himself and the United States Army. The president turned, held up a medal, blue ribbon, gold star, the Medal of Honor, the highest military decoration, the one Emmett had refused 53 years ago. He approached Lorraine's wheelchair, bent down, placed the medal in her hands. "Mrs. Rafferty, on behalf of a grateful nation, I present you with this Medal of Honor, awarded posthumously to your husband. He was a hero in the truest sense. And though he's no longer with us to receive it, his legacy lives on. In you, in your family, in the 412 men he saved who went on to live full lives because of his sacrifice." Lorraine looked at the medal, at the gold star, at the symbol of heroism and valor and everything her husband had never wanted to be remembered for. Then she reached into her bag, pulled out the wire spool, the same one Emmett had carried for 53 years, tarnished, cracked, ancient, but still intact. "This," she said, her voice stronger than anyone expected, "is what my husband would want you to remember. Not the medal, not the citations. This wire, 400 yards of copper cable that he used to find his way home. From war, from death, from everything that tried to destroy him. This wire brought him home to me, to our farm, to the life we built together. And every year for 52 years, he unspooled this wire across our field and walked the line, remembering, honoring, counting the 96 men who died so 412 could live." She held up both items, the medal and the wire. "One of these is worth more than the other, and it's not the one made of gold." The room was silent. Then slowly people began to stand, applauding. Not for the medal, not for the citation, but for the truth. For the acknowledgement that heroism wasn't about glory. It was about doing what needed to be done and carrying the weight of it forever after. For knowing the way home and having the courage to follow it. Lorraine clutched both the medal and the wire to her chest, tears streaming down her face. "I did it, Emmett," she whispered. "I told them. I told everyone. Just like I promised." 3 months later, September 2018, Pike County, Kentucky. Lorraine returned to the 36 acres. Her children drove her, helped her from the car, walked her slowly to the field where Emmett had unspooled the wire 53 times. The wire spool sat on the porch, where it had always sat, waiting. "Help me," Lorraine said. Her son understood. He tied one end to the fence post. She gripped the spool with frail hands, started walking, unspooling the wire behind her. Slow, steady, 400 yards across the field. It took her 40 minutes. By the end, she was exhausted, shaking, but she reached the far post, tied it off, then turned. Looked back at the wire stretching across earth Emmett had worked for 52 years. Earth he'd blessed with ordinary life. Earth that had given him peace when war tried to take everything. "I walked your line, Emmett," she whispered to the wind. "One last time, for both of us." She died that night, peaceful, content, 96 years old. The wire stayed up for 3 days before her children took it down, wound it carefully back onto the spool, placed it in a glass case with Emmett's Medal of Honor, where it remains today. At the Smithsonian Institution, National Museum of American History. Section, "The Price of Freedom, Americans at War." A 400-yard wire spool, tarnished copper, cracked insulation, sacred, the trail that brought one man home, the line that saved 412 lives, the thread connecting past to present to future. The wire. Present day, Pike County, Kentucky, the 36 acres. A 12-year-old boy walks through a field. His grandfather, Emmett's son, walks beside him, teaching, patient, the way Emmett had been taught, the way all fathers teach sons when the lessons matter. "Your great-grandfather bought this land in 1946, the grandfather says, planted it, built a life here, raised a family. But every year on January 24th, he did something, a ritual." "What?" The grandfather pulls out photographs, old, faded. Emmett unspooling wire across this same field. Different years, different seasons, always the same wire, always the same walk. He unspooled 400 yards of wire, the same wire he'd used in the war, and he walked it, start to finish, said it was his trail home, his reminder that even in the darkest times, you can find your way back if you know what to follow. Why did he need reminding? Because he'd been to war, son, and war changes you, makes you forget who you were, makes you wonder if you can ever be that person again. This wire, it was his way of remembering the path back, back to himself, back to family, back to life. The boy looks at the photographs, at his great-grandfather's face, young in some, old in others, but always the same expression, determined, haunted, carrying something heavy that the camera couldn't quite capture. Did he make it back? Really? His grandfather smiles, sad but proud. He tried. Every day for 53 years he tried. And you know what? That's all any of us can do. Keep trying, keep walking, keep following whatever trail we've got back to the people we love. They stand together in the field, in the space where Emmett walked 53 times, where Lorraine walked once, where ghosts and memory and love all meet in the Kentucky soil. The wire's in a museum now, the grandfather says, but the lesson isn't. The lesson is still here, still true. There's always a way home, always a way back. You just have to know what to follow and have the courage to take the first step. The boy nods, understanding maybe, or just beginning to, the way all children begin to understand the mysteries their elders carry. And somewhere in the space between memory and present, if you listen carefully on cold January mornings when mist rises off Kentucky fields, you might hear it. A voice, calm, professional, carrying across the decades. Command, this is Ghost. Mission complete. Casualties, 96 enemy, 0 friendly. Line held, battalion saved, wire recovered, returning to base. A pause, static, then quieter. Following the trail home, Ghost out. The wire glints in morning sun. 400 yards of copper in memory. 412 lives saved. 96 names Emmett never knew, but counted every night for 52 years. One man, one wire, one way home. The trail is still there, preserved in glass, remembered in stories, living in the hearts of those who understand that heroism isn't about glory. It's about finding your way back. It's about carrying impossible weight with quiet dignity. It's about marking your trail so others can follow when they get lost. It's about the wire, always the wire, the thread that connects us all, the line that brings us home.